I only had a shelf of these 16 books, which one would I want to read again soon? This one's difficult. That's what we're here for. We're here for the tension and the conflict, right? What a weird head-to-head. Hello and welcome to another video. I'm going to be taking a look at my top favorites of this year so far. And by the end of this video, hopefully I will have a new favorite of the year, at least as a placeholder for the next couple of months. Because so many of my higher star ratings have happened both at the beginning of the year and toward the end of the year, I've most likely read my favorite book of 2023. I have a background graphic that I made so you can make your own bracket and figure out what are your contenders for favorite book of the year. Just click over to my community tab and you can download that graphic whenever you want to use it. Without further ado, let's take a look at that bracket and see what we're working with. If you have a guess as to which one you think is going to land as my favorite, put your guess in the comments below. Make sure that you timestamp that and see if you're right by the end of the video. I've tried to limit this to books that I still have a really strong impression of, even months later. I would read it again. I would recommend it gladly. These are the types of books that I have on this bracket. Our first one is Amari and the Great Game by B.B. Alston. I read this at the beginning of the year. This is book 2 in the series, and I think that I liked it even maybe a little bit better than book 1. At this point in the series, we've kind of discovered the world and the ante has been upped. There is a villain, there is higher stakes, and I always seem to enjoy book 2 of a series because it has so much riding on it. I think book 2 always has the potential to be a favorite for me. Ode to a Nobody by Carolyn Brooks DuBois is a middle grade that is written in free verse, so it has a very beautiful flow to it. It's very unique, and our main character has suffered a great loss due to some natural disasters in her area, and it's impacting her neighborhood, it's impacting her family. You're seeing the impact of that, her desire to be a poet, and how she decides to write about what is happening in her life. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. If you grew up reading the Spiderwick Chronicles, I think that you will love this book because our main character, Emily, is studying the different species of fairy, and she is building an encyclopedia. One of her last destinations in order to study one of those species is kind of a remote village, very set in its ways and its lore, and they don't initially accept her as one of their own. They kind of look at her as an outsider, and she also is a very introvert, very intellectual person, and so she wants to keep her head down and just get her work done. And then we have a catalyst that's introduced in the form of her friend Bramblebee. He's a fellow professor, and he offers to help her with her publication. Even though she really just wants to do it herself, she realizes that she can benefit from relying on some of his skills, which are particularly helpful in her getting acclimated to the villagers. The next I have, this is not a recent release, but Chocolat by Joanne Harris. I read this right around Easter, which I highly recommend if you decide to pick it up. Put it on your TBR for this spring because the way that the book is laid out, it is set in the days leading up to Easter, and it's great to read when the weather is just starting to turn a little bit and there's lots of chocolate around. I won't go too deep in the plot for that one because it's been made into a movie, and chances are you either will benefit from going and not knowing anything, or you already know quite a bit about the plot. Next we have What You Can See From Here by Mariana Leky. This is a novel that was translated from German, and it was a German bestseller. I really like how unique this story is. There are just some aspects of the characterization and some of the scenes that I remember very vividly. Our main character, Louise, she's living in her grandmother's house where the floorboards are very weak in places. There are spots designating like areas where you shouldn't be standing on them for too long, you shouldn't be pacing over them, and so I just vividly remember this scene where she's on the phone, she's talking to someone from a distance, and she's carefully pacing around the room, careful not to step on those weak spots. That scene just sticks in my mind, and there are a lot of scenes like that in this book. It's a heartbreaking read, but it's well worth it. Artificial Condition by Martha Wells. I still maintain that Art, the sarcastic transport unit that we meet in this installation of the Murderbot Diaries, is my favorite character. Next is The Wishing Game by Meg Shaffer, and this was one of my Book of the Month picks this year when I attempted to read 3 Book of the Month books in 3 days, and I really loved this one. There was something about the characters and the reliance on a childhood mystery series that I just loved. I recommend it if you're looking for a cozy but fast mystery this fall. Tress of the Emerald Sea made it on this list by Brandon Sanderson, and this was the first book I read by the author. I had a really fun time with it. It is a retelling of The Princess Bride if Buttercup went to save Wesley. The comparison between the two comes through more in the way the story is told and the sarcastic kind of witty dialogue that you get, more so than the plot itself. The Will of the Many. This one was a major surprise for me. I had never read anything by James Islington before. We have a magic school that is training people. There is a very good political system element at play. There is a modern, like a futuristic yet Roman society, and fast-paced. It's hard to put down, and I honestly can't wait to read the next book. This is a book along with another that I feel like don't necessarily fit in a shared category. It's a Christian nonfiction, but it was something that I feel really shaped my year. This is about how in the times of life where you feel like nothing is progressing, maybe you're waiting for the fulfillment of a dream or the right time to move forward to the next season, there is always preparation that's taking place. There's always things that are happening in those hidden seasons. That work that is done in obscurity is actually the greater part of what is transforming you as a person. If you are a Christian, so someone who has trusted in Jesus for the forgiveness of their sins and a restored relationship with God, you are living in light of that change, and it impacts you on a daily basis. It impacts you year to year. Even if you feel like nothing is happening, there is transformation that is taking place that continues to grow that closer relationship with God, and it shapes you as a person to be more loving, to be more understanding, and to have greater insight despite your circumstances. So that was a really good one. Next up, I have Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. I read this one on my summer vacation. It has such a eclectic cast of characters that are kind of forced into a locked room setting, but it's not a mystery per se. It's more a comedy of different personalities clashing, found family vibes, and at the center of it all, a hostage situation. So it's a really fun read, great sense of humor, but there are also like so many poignant lines in there that you're gonna click with, you're gonna wanna highlight. Next is Anna Karenina, and this is another one that I feel kind of at odds to categorize. It doesn't seem to fit into any shared box because it's a classic. It's the only classic on this list. I think it took me a solid month, but I was still reading other things, which is one of my pro tips for how to read big books. Read other things while you're progressing through that larger classic. I think it's going to be really hard to differentiate when it goes head to head with another book, but that's what we're here for. We're here for the tension and the conflict, right? So The next is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. I read this very recently and loved it. It's another one that ended on a bit of a cliffhanger, as did The Will of Many, and I'm honestly the most scared about deciding between the two of those books because they were both so good. They're also just very unlike anything that I had read before. I'm not so deep in the sci-fi fantasy world that I can say that this is a repetitive plot or that I have read so many portal fantasy that this is just a fresh take. I'm still new enough that this was kind of mind-blowing to me, and I haven't really read anything like it before. It is going to be hard to beat in my opinion. Nothing Else But Miracles by Kate Albus. I plan to give you more of my full thoughts on this one in a future wrap-up video, but let's just say that Kate Albus does two things super well. One of them is historical fiction with kids as the main characters, and the second would be sibling dynamics within those stories. And those alone, I think, are great reasons to read what she has written. She only has 2 books. The first one is called A Place to Hang the Moon, and I loved both of those. The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. Let's just say if you like historical fiction, you like mystery and contemporary literature, you like sci-fi, I think that you're gonna find qualities of this story that speak to each of those. And I really enjoyed it. I also have plans to give a little bit more of a review of this one. I also will not be giving spoilers in that review either because I think that you should go in knowing as little to nothing as possible. Alebrijes by Donna, Barba, Higuera. This one lived up to the hype as well. It's set in a very bleak setting, but the story itself was fantastic. I just love how she puts kids as like the truth tellers, the storytellers, the heroes of the story. That's another one I have a review ready to share with you in a coming video. Suffice it to say, it made it to my favorites list and I read it just last week. Those are all of my ratings and the books. We're gonna go ahead and do the hard work now, which is bringing them head to head and deciding which one advances to the next bracket. Bottom left, I have Chocolat and The Unmaking of June Farrow. I think the general tie between these two is that we have magical things happening and female lead. Even though I just read it, I would be more likely to pick up again The Unmaking of June Farrow. Adrienne Young's writing style is just so beautiful. It really wraps around all the figures and objects in a scene and you can visualize them in like a very solid way, but also like a rustic way. I don't know if that makes any sense. I think June Farrow advances. Then next up we have Karenina versus Anonymous. And this is hard because, as I mentioned, these are kind of like not anything that I could compare because they're completely different genres. We have a nonfiction and we have a classic. And I honestly would be surprised if I didn't reread both of these in the future. I'm thinking like from a moral standpoint, like yeah, I could get more out of the Christian book, but I think that you can get a lot of like life-changing things from all kinds of books. You can have some really inspiring, edifying, and exposing content in books that are not Christian inherently in the story, even if the author might be Christian, which Tolstoy, you know, he purports to be. So I'm gonna go ahead and move Karenina forward just because I think I have a little bit more satisfaction to having read that one. I feel like that one deserves to move forward. Not that I will not reread Anonymous and still get lots of things out of it. Our next row on the left, we have Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies stacked up against Tress of the Emerald Sea. And the tie between these would be, we have a female lead who is very independent. She is not relying on a male character in order to accomplish her goals. She just sets out to get them done herself. We have like a fantasy world setting, and we do have like a male companion or love interest. So I don't own a physical copy of this one yet, and I'm thinking about purchasing it and ordering the second book. So I would say that this one, because I want to reread it again sooner, I almost want to move that one forward, but at the same time, I liked Tress so much, I got like the nice edition of that book. So this one's difficult. I think I'm gonna go with my gut and choose the Encyclopedia of Fairies for this one. So, alright, back over to the right side here. The Wishing Game and Anxious People. I'm more apt to read The Wishing Game again, but it was also kind of a compact story, but I think Anxious People has a lot more to grab a hold of and to reread at like different seasons of life. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and move that one forward. And then back to the left, so we have Ode to a Nobody and Nothing Else But Miracles. And this is tricky because Nothing Else But Miracles is written from third person perspective, and Ode to a Nobody is first person POV, and it's free verse versus like normal prose. So would I want to reread it soon? If I only had a shelf of these 16 books, which one would I want to read again soon? Because I think that's a sign of a favorite, that you want to read it again. I'm gonna go with Nothing Else But Miracles, even though I read that super recently, so I probably won't pick it up again very soon, and it was a library copy, so I don't own it. But I think I'm gonna move that one forward. Between Alebrijes and Artificial Condition, I feel like this is a lot easier to choose. I think it's gotta be Alebrijes because there's just more. It's not as fun to read, I think, but there's just more to it. There's more message to this one, and I think it just definitely deserves more. You could argue that there are very similar messages between Alebrijes and Artificial Condition in like looking below the surface and not judging people for their past or their external, but anyways, that's too deep for this video. So on the left here we have The Will of the Many versus What You Can See From Here. And this is another strange head-to-head. I think I'd have to go with The Will of the Many for this one. And then on the right side here, The Book That Wouldn't Burn versus Amari and the Great Game. Oh my goodness. I think this one is gonna have to move forward. So The Book That Wouldn't Burn, I'm like getting scared that I'm going to have like the conflict that I anticipated between The Will of the Many and The Book That Wouldn't Burn. So let's see what happens. So we have our 8 now. We read it down our 16 to 8. I have to decide between the 2 in each of these categories. So now they have even less to do with one another than before. Back over here on the left side, we're looking at Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies versus The Unmaking of June Farrow. We have a book that's part of a series and a book that's a standalone. We have historical fiction versus, I feel like Emily Wilde's kind of set in the past, maybe, but maybe not. And I feel like this one has to be The Unmaking of June Farrow though. Yeah, I just think there were more themes that I appreciated in that one. I'm gonna go ahead and move that one forward. Whew, okay. On the right side here, we have Anna Karenina versus Anxious People, which is such a weird, what a weird head-to-head. Man, both of these are just so good for annotating, and I think you can get a lot out of each of them. I just think I need to advance Anna Karenina though, because it's a classic and it's been around for so much longer than Anxious People, unfortunately. Nothing Else But Miracles and The Will of the Many. This is an easier choice for me. Definitely more excited to read the next book of this one and to reread this one. So that one's gonna move forward. Okay. And then on the top right, The Book That Wouldn't Burn versus Alebrijes. And I was afraid of this one. Dystopian middle grade, we have a dystopian adult. They both have some sci-fi and fantasy elements. One is a standalone, one is part of a series. Between the two of these though, having just recently read Alebrijes, I'm more likely to reread The Book That Wouldn't Burn, and there's just a lot to that one that makes you want to read it a second time. I already have book 2 pre-ordered. Oh man. It's sad for me not to have that in the final round here, but I think that I need to move this one forward because it was just so clever. All right. So to figure out our last two, so Love Many versus The Book That Wouldn't Burn. I am honestly more excited to see what happens next in this one. I think that because there was a little bit more of a cliffhanger for this one for me, I'm more excited to read the next book, and I think that one's gonna move forward. Also, when I was initially starting The Book That Wouldn't Burn, it was a little bit of a slower burn for me than the other one. So that one's going there. And then between The Unmaking of June Farrow and Anna Karenina, I'm going to have to move Anna Karenina forward because, again, like the reread potential of this one, and how many things I highlighted, like I did not highlight, I just grasped story as far as June Farrow goes. My two contenders, Anna Karenina and The Will of the Many. These are so different. These are so different. Excitement that I had when I was reading The Will of the Many and my anticipation for the second book is just a lot greater. I still had a really good time reading Anna Karenina though. I wonder if you guessed correctly as to which book would be my favorite. If you did, good job, because I sure didn't. If I had to choose right now, I think my favorite, something that's gonna stand the test of time for me, it's definitely gonna be Anna Karenina. I did not expect that to be the outcome of this video. Again, let me know if you decide to make a bracket yourself, and I would love to know what winds up being your top 2 or your favorite. It could even just be your placeholder favorite if you're not willing to like lock it in right now. I know it's really hard, but actually working through each of these head-to-heads kind of helped me figure it out, and I don't feel weird saying that Anna Karenina is my favorite book of the year. So, thanks for watching and playing along with me. I'll see you in another video soon.